On to the big story we've been tracking here for many days now. That's the coal shortage in our country and the brewing power crisis. In many of the big cities today, there are no power supply disruptions. In many of the other parts of our country, there are power cuts, load sheddings as they usually happen at this time. So it is difficult to judge whether this is an active power crisis where the load shedding and power disruptions on a larger scale are happening due to the coal shortage or not. We are here to try and break that down for you, to explain to you what exactly is the on-ground situation without really thinking what's the kind of narrative we want to send, without really taking sides on one or the other. This is not about the politics of it. This is about the ground reality, the existing coal shortage and the power crisis. What is the government going to do about it, is doing about it, and just how long exactly can this situation last? Those are the questions I'm going to be talking about. Let me tell you, as of the last set of data updated by the government itself, which is 10th October data, 17 coal-based power plants in our country had 0-day stock, no stock of coal with them. 26 plants had only 1-day stock available with them. A similar number had only 2-day stock available with them. And in an overall basis, over half the power plants either had a couple of days left, and most of them, almost all actually, had less than a week's stock available. Now, the situation changes every day, just like we saw during the second wave of COVID when the oxygen crisis hit us, that the situation was changing on an hourly basis. Just like that, as coal stocks are replenished in many of the plants, the situation changes on a daily basis. But I give you this information because this is the last consolidated government available information. That's as far as the coal stock situation is concerned. It's very clear that there is a dire shortage. We actually even compared it to what it was in 2020 and 2019. And we saw that in 2019, for example, most power plants, even in this month, at this time, had almost 2 to 5 times the coal stocks which are present right now, which shows you that the situation is dire as far as the stock is concerned. Now let's talk about power generation and where we are right now. On an overall basis, few of the worst hit states are Punjab, which actually account for 34% of the national shortage, Rajasthan, which accounts for another big chunk of almost 24%, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, Bihar, Haryana. The national shortage in terms of power generation, coal-based power generation to be specific, is 86.87 million units. In other words, in the worst hit states, in Haryana, there is no coal in 4 out of 5 plants. In Uttar Pradesh, there is no coal in 3 out of the 19 plants. In Punjab, there is no coal in 1 out of the 5 plants. In Rajasthan, the situation is similar. And that is how it's actually going across the country. Now remember that even though the power demand is going up, the consumption is going up, it's not peaked yet. Had the country actually been using the kind of power we do in normal times, we would be in a messier place. But we aren't, thank God for that. Let's go across to Ayushman to now get you an updated situation as far as what is it that the government has been doing and what is it that the government said today, Ayushman. Repeatedly, they are saying no reason to panic. We've got a handle on this situation. How exactly? What is it that they have been doing?
Well, Tanvi, currently the coal minister has said this, and this is from Coal India Limited also, that the replenishment of coal is being done at the most expeditious manner, and it is the coals are being delivered. In fact, the help of Indian Railways is also being taken in order to deliver the coal to the required places wherever it is needed. The coal stock, the rolling stock, which we are being currently told, Tanvi, is at about 4.5 days. It's the national average that we are seeing. The power minister said that it is the stock, but there is daily replenishment that is taking place. But at the same time, this situation to normalize will at least take a week or more than that, and even it can go up to October end, is what the power minister said. But the most important aspect is that yes, the coal shortage is there and the government says that, but most importantly they also highlight that it is not going to affect the power crisis, the looming crisis that we are talking about, the states are talking about. Despite that, we are seeing the newspaper ads in Assam, Tanvi, where the government of where the power company has given an advertisement in newspaper that power disruptions may take place. We have seen the statement from Delhi Power Minister, but the similar rebuttal came from centre. So the centre on one hand is saying that the coal replenishment is being taking place on a regular time basis and the situation will improve in coming 3 to 4 days, and it will, again the stock will start rising after some days. But the states continue to maintain that there is a looming crisis that needs to be looked upon and something has to be done in this regard.
Ayushman, one other aspect that we should also highlight is that the center also seems to be indicating, including, some of the ministers and even officials, is that the onus was also on states and their power companies to ensure that there was a bare minimum stock. Is there an explanation there as to why suddenly it's become such a big issue that everybody is talking about? Is there part of a responsibility that the center believes also falls on state governments?
Well, Tanvi, what we have learned so far from the power ministry and also talking to the officials is that this is a phenomena which normally occurs post-monsoon. There are some reasons listed out from the power ministry, but the most important aspect is this matter came to light itself after the power minister said that it was a touch-and-go situation. Only after that we saw the states writing to the centre. There was a situation in Andhra Pradesh where the power company had to write and to tell the consumers that you need to exercise restraint and judiciously you have to use that. The state share is somewhere that the center is not much talking about at this point of time. We have seen the PMO reviewing the situation. We have seen the Home Minister taking high-level meeting there where the coal minister, power minister, coal secretary and power secretary were present. The NTPC has been here in National Capital directed that all those needs of DISCOMs must be catered to and there should be no power disruption. So as of now, Tanvi, because we know there is a situation which is not very good and it is a crisis, so as to say. So for state's role, there has been nothing that has come from center. But yes, center does maintain that somewhere the situation is improving because the required amount of coal, 1.8 million ton, is something that they are aiming. And in the coming days, they are going to achieve. That is what Power Ministry is currently saying.
But we have to also keep in mind that that's considering the demand that we're looking at right now. Now, as the economy revives and as winter begins to set in, the demand for power will also increase. And that challenge, everybody has to keep in mind and begin working towards it so that we don't again find ourselves in the current kind of situation at all. Ayushman, thanks so much for tracking this story and bringing us all of those updates. Now, let me say good evening to Dr. Sameer Kagalkar of the BJP, Ahbab Singh Grewal of the Aam Aadmi Party, B.M. Verma, former chairman for the Jharkhand State Electricity Board, advisor to SR Power, joining me this evening. Sanjeev Sahai, former secretary for Ministry of Power, and Sarita Singh, assistant editor at Economic Times, also joining me this evening. Let me actually first go across to Mr. B.M. Verma. Mr. Verma, what is also important is to put this in perspective. Our reporter was also pointing out that post-monsoon, usually we do see a situation of shortage of coal versus what the demand is. But is there a difference this time to your mind, and how grave is that difference?
Let me tell you a broad picture. We are used in India to the crisis management. Now, since the matter has gone up to Mr. Amit Shah and both the ministers, you will find everybody will rise up to the occasion and the crisis will be minimized, if not zero. right? And power companies also will find out ways and means of diverting the supply from non-critical areas to critical areas. Throughout our careers, we have been used to do it. But let me give you yesterday my personal impression. Yesterday evening, I was seeing one of the national TV channels. I saw a old lady practically crying that the bijli aati nahi hai. That reminded me of my UP days in 2003 when I was in charge of the Eastern UP called Purvanchal. Now, today in our last 13 years, 18 years, things have improved quite a lot. We need not to panic that what will happen. As I said, there are two factors. One, the short term, maybe next 10 days, 12 days. And I am sure ministry is working on it. We have technical reasons. We have systems of scheduling our roasting and all that. But what worries me is the long-term perception. These problems are known in the power sector right from 1991, when the power sector was opened. Things have been going at the same speed. It remains center, state, blaming each other on this. The major issue is, what do we do? Learn not out of this particular incident. I'm not worried about. This has given us a wake-up call.
Correct.
At right time when people were thinking, are confident.
Yes.
The issues on the power sector are much larger than this tip of the bird, what we are seeing. And the major lies in the distribution reforms. In spite of all whatever schemes, if you go through the Google every time a minister or every government comes, power for all, no power cut, 100% electrification. These things have been happening. How do we pump in money in this sector so that the coal factory, now if you go to coal company.
Yes, so Mr. Verma, you have raised an extremely important issue, and I want to come back to that issue because there is a long-term problem here in a country where power shortage is not a new phenomena. It's actually pretty much a daily situation in many parts of our country even now. In a country where we are overly dependent on only a handful of players for power generation, which are also in an extremely bad financial status, and that's not a new story either which ways. What you just pointed out has gone on for several decades that I know of. I'm sure it's been longer than that. It's the change that we need to talk about, and I'll come to that long-term point in just a bit. But I want to speak about what's happening right now. And Sarita, good evening to you. A part of the commentary that came in from the government today was also to suggest that, well, it's the states who were told to stock up on time and they didn't do so. Do help our viewers understand what is it that we're talking about, the coal stock up that needs to happen at the power generation plants, whose responsibility is it, and how did we fail there?
Tanvi, this is a joint responsibility of states, power generation companies, and also the Central Electricity Authority that monitors these data on a regular basis. So states like Punjab, as you said, Punjab, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, and Uttar Pradesh are reporting power supply curtailments. And they also are saying that the coal supplies have improved now. However, most of these states, it's not a coincidence that some of these states were not making payments to coal companies and supplies to them were regulated. So as far as that much is concerned, of course, the states are responsible for the mess.
Okay, so you're saying it's, the center, the state, all responsible for this. There is also a central committee that actually tracks this. And of course, somebody like you who's been tracking this sector for a while now, It isn't an overnight problem, Sarita. It's not something that hasn't been spoken about, hasn't been written about. Then why is it that day after day, for a sustained level for almost a month, we saw this kind of a situation, which is only seem to be improving now?
So it's as it is said, it's a combination of various adverse factors that has played this, and of course the authorities did not act in time. I was speaking to the Power Ministry officials, and they said the Coal Ministry, Coal India had been sending warning letters to generation companies to stock up the coal. But that point in time, because of COVID, the demand was less, and it was not this kind of spurt in demand was not foreseen. So there was a lag there. Of course, the Power Ministry should have also intervened and told the generation companies to stock up, which now it is doing. So these measures, had they been taken in when the time in right time, they would have not led to this kind of crisis.
Okay, so then let me bring in Dr. Samir Kagalkar now. Dr. Kagalkar, we looked at the data because it's easy to get carried away to say, oh my God, there is shortage, or oh my God, there is a power crisis, there is a coal shortage, unprecedented levels. And the other side, of course, the central government repeatedly says everything is under control, everything is okay, we don't need to panic, we don't need to worry, the situation is not so bad. So we actually thought, let's look at what the situation is and compare it on a year-on-year basis. So we took up the date of October 10th and we compared to what is the coal stock situation in power plants. And then we saw that compared to 2019, when most power plants had about 10 days on an average, stock for at least 10 days on an average, in 2021, that was just for 4 days. I'm not even highlighting 2020 because that was the peak pandemic year when we had just come out of a lockdown situation. Things are just beginning to look up. So that was a very different year. I compared it to 2019, and that showed us that the stock situation this time versus 2019 is significantly different. In 2019, it was 4.5 times what we have right now. And the stock situation for coal at thermal plants has consistently been going down since June. Month after month after month, it should have changed post-monsoon. It didn't change post-monsoon. We also similarly looked at on the energy generation side. There also, the difference between what was the shortage in 2019 versus now is huge. The shortage of power that we are facing right now is actually 6 times the shortage we had in 2019. So yes, while the biggest of the cities in our country may not be facing a power cut right now, it's very difficult to say what is the reality in several other parts in smaller towns and rural areas. Dr. Kagalkar, how could we let ourselves get to this position?
Thanks, Tanvi, for having me on the show. Rightly pointed out, we need to probably understand the entire value chain, so to speak, starting from the production of coal to the power production, to the power distribution, and then finally the retail consumption. You started off with the data, the explanation, and the issues from the power generation plants onwards. What we also need to look at, if at all we need to point a accusing finger at coal shortage, is what is the kind of a coal production that's happening. Fact number one, in H1 this year, and we are still yet to complete October, and we have the data. In H1, we have the record production of coal from the CIL. Number two, as we are talking today, we have roughly in the range of 22 to 24 days worth of coal stock with the coal producing companies. So the point is not the availability or crisis in coal production per se. The issue is in terms of stock at the plants. It could be a 1 day, 2 day, 4 day, 8 day as you're talking of. And there could be a panic trigger. It's simply like a run on the bank, right? The moment you start panicking, the moment you start blowing it out of proportion, either due to ignorance or worse still, due to out of political compulsion. We have seen similar political compulsion driven accusations, oh, there's a heavy shortage of vaccinations, there's a heavy shortage of oxygen, come audit and the oxygen automatically stabilizes. So this is something that we have to understand in an objective manner. If the coals minister, Prahlad Joshi ji, says we have roughly about 22 to 24 days of coal stock in the coal producing companies, it is not the shortage of coals. Let me reiterate, let me repeat it. It is not a shortage of coals. Now, it could be in terms of transportation to the power generating companies. And later on, as there could be one more issue that's still not been talked of in terms of the behavior of the distribution companies. Yes, there is a post-monsoon disruption in some amount of transportation. That said, the zero stock in few of these power plants is not something that which accounts for a massive number of what the power generation companies are. No one is denying that there is a small issue, but blowing it out of proportion to make it look like as if it was 31st July 2012. Remember the day? Entire of North India went blacked out. There's absolutely no comparison to that. It's so easy to shout and create panic and point an accusing finger.
Dr. Kagalkar, I'd rather not wait for a blackout to raise the alarm. I'm sorry if you're going to blame us. I'm sorry if you're going to blame us for raising questions at the right time, raising alarm at the right time, rather than waiting for the country to plunge into darkness and then ask questions. I'm sure there is another segment of the media that wants to wait until it's too late to ask the questions. But please don't blame us. This crisis has been brewing for several months now. And I'm sure you know, you are a very well-versed economist, very well-versed with what the global developments are. You know what the economic crisis across the world has been and what is the situation in our country for the last 3 months. So you and I are not having this conversation, could have had this conversation 3 months ago. We are having this conversation today, Dr. Kagalkar, because at one point it was unprecedented when over 100 power plants in our country had supercritical levels of coal stocks, when state after state had some or the other number of coal power plants which had shut down. Now, it is okay to say if certain parts of Uttar Pradesh are always used to seeing a 6-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour power shortage and load shedding, so it doesn't matter to them, so let's not talk about it. But I'm sorry, we should not be accepting those things today. Even in Maharashtra, there are cities even today that see daily power load shedding that takes place. Should that mean that we don't ask questions when the situation gets this dire?
If you're done, allow me 30 more seconds, Tanvi.
I'll give you 1 minute. Please go ahead, by all means. But not fair to blame us for asking questions.
Absolutely not. We never said that. We never said that. If anything, we are putting facts on the table. Number one, coal production is at the highest in H1. Coal stock is at 24 days, which is more than sufficient. And the coal production on an average across plants is in the range of 2 to 4 days. Yes, when you talk of average, there could be some plants which have 0 or 1 day. There could be some plants that have 8 days worth of coal. That said, I want to come back to what Verma Saab was talking just about now. It's a larger reform. You also made a mention saying that we need to be thinking of the long-term vision. Which government is the one that actually looked at Uday means of saying that we'll reform the power sector? When we are talking of generating power and giving power to 18,000 villages, it just didn't happen automatically. There was a reform, a big ticket reform with respect to what the discoms, how they are behaving in terms of their T&D losses and so on and so forth. On the back end, if you look at the coal mine auction, as we are talking today the third tranche started off. Auction of third tranche started off, and the same coal mine auction in the earlier government became a massive scam. So ask of the government, rightly so, what are we doing for the long-term strategy? We are taking into account the coal mining reforms. We have set the ball rolling. We have taken into account and set the ball rolling on the distribution reforms. So much, most of the state government financial devolution has a small but a strong component of power sector reforms attached to it. If this is not a good policy by the government to ensure that there is a good amount of power sector reforms, what else is this?
Okay, before I get Mr. Verma to come in on that, since he raised this issue first, I must get Ahbab Singh Grewal to also speak on this issue. Now, it's mighty convenient for some political parties, Mr. Grewal, to make a big issue out of this. Power crisis and power crunch in a state like Punjab is such a big issue that it's actually an election issue this time. Why are we seeing the Punjab government turn around and suddenly make it sound as if it's the central government to blame for everything suddenly?
Well, you know what? I've got 2 points. Before I come to the Punjab government, I'd like to talk about something nationally. The BJP, the opposition ruled states are obviously saying that they don't have coal. The BJP ruled states, where they've already brought in Ram Rajya, are saying that everything is all right. But I just saw a news report where the actors playing Lord Ram in Ram Leela in UP are protesting that we don't even have electricity for performances of Ram Leela. So much for that. If the BJP wants us to believe that because there was no power in the old times so that we don't need electricity, it's perfectly all right. Or they'll have to accept the fact that they have failed in their sole duty of providing the most important or the most essential commodity for modern era while they were busy literally crushing dissent. Number one. Number two, in a state like Punjab, our Chief Minister and Mr. Sidhu are so oblivious of the facts. They are so happy announcing SOPs. They're so happy doing their own drama that they seem to forget that it was also their responsibility, and they have made sure, and they and their predecessors have made sure that the power grid in Punjab has gone miserably wrong, and the power production in Punjab has totally gone into the hands of private players. Number three, coming back to what Mr. Verma said, it is a very important point. Well, we accept the BJP's view that there was nothing done during 50, 60 years of Congress rule, but it's been 15 years and it's been 7 years since Modi ruling. And after 7 years, they finally decided to start thinking about getting the ball rolling on power reforms. Well, congratulations. They might just be able to do it within the next 25 years. The thing is, they are not bothered when a crisis comes up. Rightly, as Mr. Verma pointed out, that we are good at crisis management and we go from crisis to crisis. They have been going from a crisis to crisis. There was a crisis of COVID, of oxygen. We met that crisis. There was a crisis of a shortage of COVID vaccines. We met that crisis. Now there's a crisis of coal, and we'll try and meet that crisis as well. But during that, India suffers, the economic activity in India suffers. And that's the point. That's the point that is the most important, that our governments have totally neglected that. The Punjab government, I totally understand. I live in Punjab. I totally understand. I might just have to start doing a phono with you because the light might just go off right now. So I know the way the Punjab government has functioned, but the BJP was in power in Punjab for the past at least 10 years with the Akalis. They are also responsible for the mess. And now they can't just go into technicalities and say that, okay, we are trying to do this. And one more thing, I'd like to remind the BJP spokesperson, sir, we import almost 60% of our coal requirements. Our own coal production is only able to meet about 40% of our requirements. So we have failed miserably because the coal has to be imported by the central government, and the central and the state governments have failed miserably in doing so. And that's the reason. That's the reason that we are in such dire straits today, that there is not even enough electricity for a Ram Leela in a state where Ram Rajya has already come.
Well, I know the story that you're referring to and the comments that came in by those actors, but I would just say that in many of the North Indian states, the state of power supply any which ways comes along with a large chunk of load shedding, just like the state of Punjab does. Whether or not there is a coal shortage or not is a different thing. But let me bring in Mr. Sanjeev Sahai, former secretary in the Power Ministry. Mr. Sahai, good evening. Thank you for joining us. The big question that the citizens and the viewers would want to know is, was this situation avoidable where we are right now? Sure, the entire country hasn't plunged in darkness right now, but that doesn't mean that the situation is in dire. In fact, before I go to them, Dr. Kagalkar, would you want to respond to what has been said by Mr. Grewal?
I mean, it's a very interesting political manifesto pitch, completely understandable, their political compulsions to talk of politics when confronted with a technical, objective, economic fact, right? And let me address it factually instead of getting into a political slugfest. He spoke of the coal import being one of the key factors, which while is absolutely true given the historical situation, this year as we are talking of, let me reiterate that the imported coal-based power generation has dropped 30% this year, and the production of local coal has drastically gone up, so much so that the H1 this year is a record production. While we are at
Sorry, this statistic is a little misleading, Dr. Kagalkar. To say import has dropped 30% this year is not necessarily a great thing.
imported coal-based power generation
Yes,
has
is
dropped
not necessarily a great thing when we are looking at a power generation crisis. Perhaps this was not a year, unless you tell me that the overall usage of coal is exactly the same as it was year before that and the year before that, discounting 2020, and of that, the percentage has differed. Coal India has actually managed to replace that much. If the usage of coal is lower and the power generation is lower, the imports would also actually effectively be lower.
You're absolutely twisting the fact. The matter of fact is, if you look at the yesterday's press statement by the government, especially with respect to a state like Delhi, let me give that one instance of Delhi, and the peak demand of Delhi has been met on a day-to-day basis, and there's been absolutely no shortage. This is the press statement.
Of course,
in a
if
written
there
form.
was a shortage, there would be power cuts in the national capital. Everybody knows that.
No. So then the issue is where? Then the issue is where is the issue then? Exactly.
The issue is that I have my power supplier telling me to start conserving electricity because they may not be able to meet this tomorrow. So now I am living in this uncertain period where I don't know if tomorrow there is going to be a power cut. Why should I, as a citizen of national capital, even have to be in this situation?
You are attributing this to a coal shortage while it is not the case. The point I'm trying to make is there are 4 stops in the value chain: the coal production, the power generation, the power distribution, and the retail. And the power distribution companies are saying there is a shortage, conserve power, right? If that is the case, it is not because of the coal shortage. I've been giving you facts and figures that state that coal production is fairly and about the average. Now, where does the issue lie?
No, where is, I'm sorry, I just quote, when I came to you first, Dr. Kagalkar, I came to you with the situation of coal stock availability at power plants in 2021 versus 2020 versus 2019. So I don't know how much coal is being produced and where it's sitting at and what it's being used for. It's definitely not with the power generation plants, and it's the power generation plants who's not giving this power to the suppliers for them to give it to us. And state after state after state has sent such messages to their people saying, use your power judiciously because there may be a crisis tomorrow. Mr. Narayan Murthy, YSRCP spokesperson, joins me this evening. Mr. Narayan Murthy, politics aside, let's not politicize this issue. Let's not create panic where there isn't any. Tell us honestly, what is the situation of coal stock availability and power generation in your state right now?
Yeah, as far as calculations which have been given to the government by government, triggered by the coal shortage was limited to not limited to Andhra Pradesh. There were many expenses factors responsible for it. Energy Minister also explained the same, and the state won produces for the large-scale monetary savings achieved by the slow of measures in the last 2 years. National level coal shortage for the crisis of the terminal power plants in the state. Instead of that, it was only a passing phase. Now, central government supposed to take steps to import coal or produce a coal from the available mines in a state or across India, all mines, coal mines. But unfortunately, all of the sudden, there was an announcement that coal is not available. It is only available for two days production of the power in the coal production units. So it's very unfortunate, and of course, the crisis has come across not only one state or 2 states, across this all over India, all states. So let us find out the production improvements in coal mines in available states, or let us plan for the import of coal from the other countries in big way. Otherwise, there will be very huge loss for the stock, whatever the economy, which is going bad because of the
Here is the BJP spokesperson, Mr. Murthy, who's saying, why are you creating panic when there are no power disruptions taking place and we are managing the situation? We seem to have lost that feed. We're going to get back to Mr. Narayan Murthy in just a bit. Yes, Mr. Grewal.
Well, sorry to be butting it, but BJP likes to blame everything on history. And I like to remind them that 2014 also looks like history now. So it's been a long time. 50, 60 साल, 70 साल कांग्रेस ने गड्ढे खदवा लिए. They dragged people on the roads. Now they are telling people that no, you don't have power. And finally, when the country and the economy was recovering from the loss that had occurred during the COVID situation, they have messed up things. The sole fact is that the central leadership of the BJP is so busy running from one state election to another that they forget that the real fact is that you're supposed to run the country. And they knew a power crisis was coming. The global media was screaming that a power crisis was coming. The global media was saying that as the world recovers from COVID, there's going to be shortages. And they forgot probably to even plan for it. Or maybe just because Mr. Modi didn't go on foreign trips, he didn't read foreign newspapers. So basically, the BJP likes to point towards any technicality, but the fact remains that the central government, the state government, is happy, that's for sure. And in short, the power is okay, and everything else. But the central government has in its primary responsibility is to provide energy for the country, and that should have been done. Unfortunately, they took it up, and now they're running on towards technicalities to save themselves. Well, that's all there is to say about this.
Okay, let me see if I can go across to Mr. Murthy, and if he is back with us. Mr. Murthy, the BJP says, why are you creating panic when there are no power disruptions in the country?
No, it is all false statement, because the central government is itself announced that shortage of the coal in the production units, and there are 50% of the units not functioning now itself. How can we say that managing and all? It is not management. It is not management hiding the facts and telling about the false to the people and to the media, diverting the facts. It is unfortunate. Let us talk on facts. Let us realize and let us think about alternatives. Let us think about the precautions. These all we have to make now.
Okay.
All of this sudden, after 2 days, the total power is cut. What we can do?
Okay, all right. Let me just very quickly, what can we do is the big question that you're asking. So is everybody in this country today. Mr. Verma, it won't be fair of me to ask you to, let's discuss the long-term solutions today, perhaps another day in the coming week. I'm sure this is going to be a continuing story. But today, let me ask you this. What are our immediate solutions? Where is it that we can look for immediate, stock availability to replenish the plants that are needed? How quickly can the import take place? How quickly can Coal India mine some more and get it to the power plants?
Let me tell you, the crisis has happened. Crisis is being attended. I'm sure things will start improving. But coal-based power projects based on imported coals will continue to either producing very less or not producing at all, because coal prices have gone up to from $60 per ton to $160 or $200 per ton. And there is a issue of increase in prices, which is pending for maybe over the last 2 years. But we need to keep this in mind, that the imported coals need to, power projects on imported coal have to run on a low ash, high calorific imported coal. Domestic coal is not a substitute and cannot be easily run. Keeping aside this particular state, like Mundra of Tata Power, Adani's power plant, SR's power plant. So these are the coastal-based power plants. When they were conceived, at that time, because things were looking tough. So import will allow us, will require large amount of exchange. As we say, in everything we are talking of Atmanirbhar, it continues to fall back on our domestic coal, however poor and it may be. In last 40, 50 years, we have overcome all technological issues and all coal-based power stations on domestic load, we must do. So today is monitoring, it is happening. And if an emergency, as far as Delhi is concerned, I would say it will never get a power cut because it has a priority state. I was in two of the, I had built Rajghat power station in Delhi. I was working at Badarpur power stations. So Delhi has a unique solution. Let's come to the point whether we can make Delhi at every place, every city of Delhi. And similarly, when I was in UP, Lucknow was entirely different than balanced cities of city.
Yes.
We have to look forward. How do we solve this problem? And I'll give you one line solution. When we were in school, there was a saying, money, it is money which makes the mere poor. Today, money is not available. Money is needed by the coal supplier. Money is needed by the power producer. Money is needed by the power transmitter. Money is needed by the distribution companies. But inflow of money is much less. And that problem, though we are talking about maybe over the last 20 years, it has not happened at all. If we focus on one issue, how do we pump in money? Either through collection, which I find is not going to be that easy.
Correct.
Politically, or through the budgetary allocations. That's only my last one advice which will require.
Fixing the money part would fix a lot of the problems of the power sector. I completely agree with you. A conversation that has gone on for too long, but would perhaps need a bigger political will to change this around. But irrespective of whether those reforms could have been brought in, have been partially brought in, and what can be done, this situation perhaps, if we have the foresight and if we were tracking it closely, could have been avoided. Remember, it is the very same government that has been talking about an economic revival much before the indicators actually began to show this. It's this government that had a bigger faith in how this country will bounce back after even the second pandemic wave. And if that was the view, and if that was the call, then how is it that we miss the complete point that if there is economic revival, it would mean a larger demand for electricity, a higher power consumption, and we should be prepared for that. How did we miss the fact that during the times of pandemic, absolutely no sector, just like the mining sector and the power sector, was actually pumping in money to prepare at a time when there was no demand? And if that was the state, then suddenly when demand emerges, there would be a struggle to meet that. It's not a situation that suddenly cropped up, possibly one that we could have avoided had we the foresight to plan better, to coordinate better. At least now the government is actually looking into it very closely and ensuring that wherever there is a dire situation, coal stocks reach that place so that the power supplies on a larger basis don't get disrupted. But difficult to say what's going on in smaller towns in rural parts of our country where load shedding and power cuts are any which ways a part of their daily life. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation.